Hey, kia ora. Helen Brahms here, coming to you live from Surprise in Arizona. Hope you're having a super fantastic, sparkling day. Welcome to Before the Dirt Nut podcast number 1940. Fun Friday genealogy tips. Woohoo! We're back into the genealogy. I have missed giving you guys genealogy tips. I don't know if you have missed me talking about them, but I have definitely missed researching them and coming up with ideas to talk with you about. So we are back. Networking Riches is done. We're done with scorpions. We are done with smoke detectors. We are back to genealogy again. Yay! And it's Fun Friday. Yay! So what do we have for you today for Fun Friday for different things that you can talk about with your with genealogy? So let's just start at the top and walk our way through, shall we? Actually, I should have pulled up some. I must remember to keep pulling up examples for you guys. But anyway, so the question we have for you is what fun information have you uncovered about your ancestors? And you're probably going, but Helen, where do I find this information? I'm so glad you asked that question because we're going to have a look at some ways that you can find some really fun, quirky, unexpected things about your ancestors and things they may have owned. We're going to be looking at we're just gonna start at the top of the list and work our way down. Excuse me. Hang on. Lubricate the vocal cords. All right. So the first thing you do is explore historical newspapers for gossip and oddities. Newspapers were full of gossip. Gossip from Mr. Paul Jones from, and then they would put the street address, was admitted into hospital last night with a broken arm. He is expected to be there for at least 7 days. Yes, they did put that detail in there. They would even give you updates over those 7 days. Mr. Paul Jones, who was admitted into hospital on this particular date from this particular address, has a broken arm and he is recovering very well and is expected to leave for his home in 3 days. Then on the day that he was released, it would then say in there, Mr. Paul Jones who was admitted with a broken arm after a 7-night hospital stay is heading to his home and put the address. There's a lot of information that you can unpack in that little thing. So you can find these oddities about your ancestors that may be mentioned in there. There would also be like birth announcements, marriage announcements, engagement announcements, death obituaries. There may be articles that were written on the birth, engagement, marriage, or the death. You can find things that, Mrs. Gavin, suddenly another thing of a thing. Mrs. Gavin Smythe held a afternoon tea and had an afternoon tea with a group of friends. And present at this event was, and they would list everybody that was there. It may even describe what everybody was wearing, and it would describe the food that they had and the types of teas that they drank. Yes, they were gossip columns. There may also be in there court cases, everything from drunk and disorderly to there's murder cases. Sorry, my brain just went. With court cases, you're looking at just petty crimes through to major crimes, everything in between. I've seen some very funny divorce stories written. Now, they probably weren't funny at the time, but reading back on them, all these years later, you're reading about a divorce decree that was passed down. And some of the things that they were fighting over was just sort of like, seriously? But, at the time, it was a very important detail. You may even find ads. My great-grandfather had ads in New Zealand papers because he was a gunsmith as well as a locksmith. And what else did he do? He made guns, serviced guns, repaired them, made guns, serviced them. He was also a locksmith as well. So he had that craft as well, and there's a few other things, but his advertisements would be in different newspapers, and so I've come across a few of those for my great-grandfather. It had H. Eakins and gunsmith, locksmith, and there's a few other bits and pieces written under there as well. But it would say where his store was. It would have the address details for his store. Come on in. But you can actually find relatives through the ads because most of the ads back then may even mention the owners if it was for a business. So you may not have been aware that your ancestor may have owned a business. Now, there was one that I was looking at, and um, on the census, they were living in the directory. It showed this address that they were living in, and in the directory, it also had that this business. There was a family business of that same name that was listed in the directory. So it had, like I can't remember what was the name. Might have been like something like Davis. So it had Davis and Sons Transportation. Then underneath it would have Davis, and then it would have all of their home addresses listed. But some of the Davises also had the same address as the business. And looking at maps and stuff from back then, it turned out that they had these transportation business, and they had also they had property. They had this big plot of land there that they had the transportation business on, but they also had room for houses, or one building that everybody lived in that had apartments. So that was kind of interesting to find that as well, to see what they did and things like that. So you can find some really cool details. They may even talk about in the theater, if they had a play that was going on, or a musical, or they had a concert, you may find your ancestors' names in there as participants in the theater, as theater people. They could be there as actors and singers and musicians and things like that. But they may also list who was at a particular performance, and if your ancestors were high enough in society, they may have been mentioned there. There was one family I was looking at one time, and they had a birthday party for their 10-year-old son. Well, in the article, they listed that this was the party for, and they listed a 10-year-old, a 10th birthday for, and they listed the son's name. This is his parents. Here are his siblings. Here are his aunts. Here are his uncles. And they had the whole family listed that had come into attendance for this thing. And they even put the addresses to where the party was held at the parents' house. So you'll find lots of really cool articles in there. And when I go looking in newspapers for birth, deaths, and marriage announcements, obituaries. What else do I go looking for? Sometimes I just do a search on a name and see what comes up. And some of them I can tell immediately are not related to the person, are not in the area that I'm looking at for a client, or maybe even my own tree. But I get caught up in the story, and I'm like, oh my gosh. And you get caught up in the story, and it's sort of like, oh, what do other newspapers have to say about this? And you suddenly get sidetracked. Yes, I very much get sidetracked. They go down the rabbit hole and go find it. And then I start learning more about this family and the stuff that they did and things like that. I even found a newspaper article for a client one time whose, was it grandfather or great-grandfather? I think it was grandfather, was a train engineer. And he was the first one to take a particular train along a new piece of track. And in the engine with him were his two sons, who was my client's father and uncle. And that was just a really cool story about, this new piece of track had been laid. That was the first train that went across it. This was the engineer. He happened to have his boys on board with him. And that was just a really cool story that my client didn't know about. But so it added something to their family history. So there's all sorts of stuff that you can find through newspapers. Sometimes just go and pick a newspaper in an area that your ancestors lived, and maybe search by their last name and see what comes up. They will have sports records in there too. All the different results from different sports that were played at the time as well. Everything from track and field through to your football, which is soccer, American football. I think I even had cricket in there one time. Well, that's because I was looking at the English stuff. I had cricket in there. All sorts of sports were played in there. Horse racing, even the names of the horse owners were in there. Your ancestor may have owned horses at one point that were raced. You find all sorts of really cool. The newspapers is full of stuff. You just got to go and look for it. You can dive into probate inventories. Now, when you get the probate packet, in there is the will, last will and testament. Then there's inventories in there about what possessions that they had, because they had to do an inventory when the person died, so they could then figure out who was the executrix and what do they have to do to distribute this stuff, and who are they distributing it to, and why. Did they own a cow? Did they own a piano? Did they own some books? Did they have, what was their main form of transportation? Maybe they had horses to pull a wagon. Maybe they had a car if it was in the early 1900s. You never know until you go dive into the probate records. And if there's any court cases that come out of those probates, like if there was like disputes, people contesting the will, it's very interesting to see what the heirs considered to be valuable or what they were fighting for. And some of them have been sort of like, really? You're fighting over a cow? Really? There have been some out there. You'd be surprised at what people will argue over and contest in the wills and things. And then there's letters from other people that knew that person and their character. You might find letters from creditors who are wanting payment from the estate before the heirs get to inherit the estate and things like that as well. So anything relating to the probate will be in these packets. Another one is you can search for nicknames and alias records. If you had ancestors who went by a particular name, have a look on search like census records to see if they use their nickname in there rather than their birth name. Because if you're going, well, I can't find this relative, try nicknames. If they were known for something, if they were known by a particular nickname, have a look through different records for that. Sometimes on the U.S. Social Security application and claims records for those that have deceased, down the bottom they have also known as, and it will have their other names listed in there and the dates that they were changed, which is very interesting because I found one person who had been adopted and I found his birth name. So not only were we looking for, and we're not sure if it was a formal adoption or not. That's the one thing we didn't know, but we searched, found his Social Security application and claims thing for his number, and we and went down to the bottom there and listed down there where was his mother's name, his father, and was his father's name on there as well. Sometimes it'll list both parents. Can't remember if his father's name was on there, but it had what he was known as when he was born, and in the years his name got changed to something different. His first and second name basically stayed the same, although he did like shorten the middle name down to an initial, and that was recorded in there, but his last name definitely changed. So we're not sure if it was a formal thing or if he just contacted the administration and says, I'm now known as blah, 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 blah. Not sure how the name changes worked back then. And so we were able to then go and find his actual birth records, because usually with an adoption, they issue a new birth certificate with the adoptive parents' names on it. In this case, they haven't, which makes me wonder if there was actually an adoption there, or whether it was the fact that the mother got married again and the stepfather informally adopted the children, and they started using his last name for ease of records of things. But we did find his original birth certificate, so that then opened up a whole new place to go and everything else. So, you never know. They could have a stage name. If they acted on stage, they could have had a stage name. Where do you find those? Look at the playbills. You're looking for the cast list. You're looking for the stage records. You're looking for the listings, and somewhere along the way in there, also on the Social Security things, there may be their stage name, may be written in there, because that could be what they were known as from that date onwards. You can investigate clubs and organizations. Did they belong to a social club, a lodge, or a fraternity? And those groups often keep records of their members and events, including some fun stuff that may have happened, like hazing, when the hazing was big in those days, and other sorts of mischief they may have gotten up to would be recorded in the club or the organization's or the fraternity's records to say, hey, on this date we went and, we threw toilet paper, we TP'd Mr. Professor John's place or something like that. You will find that stuff in the fraternity records and things. Be surprised what you'll find in fraternity records. They've made very interesting reasons. So do yearbooks. They're starting to put yearbooks online as well. But those there, you can find interesting things in there about your ancestors. Were they part of the drama group? Were they on the debate team? Were they on a sports team? Did they write an article? Were they in a band? You can find all sorts of information about people in yearbooks. Yeah, so that's another good one to go and look at too. Not just, but look at school yearbooks. Track down ancestral recipes. Explore old cookbooks, community recipe books. Now, community recipe books will have who submitted the recipes in there. Maybe your ancestor submitted a recipe that's in there. Is that recipe from a family collection? Hmm. And when you find the old cookbooks, are there handwritten notes in them? I have notes written in my cookbooks all over the place. Like, I tried this one and substituted this for this. It turned out great. Or this is really good, but found I had to bake it for this length. Baked it for this length of time. Because the baking time and the recipe may have been off, and so I ended up, or the oven may not have different settings and stuff on it, and so it had to be baked a little longer or a little shorter. So you put those sorts of handwritten notes in there. Some people, when they're waiting for the recipes to, when they're waiting for the items to cook or bake and stuff, they may doodle in the margins on the recipe book. I've heard of that happening too. And, maybe you'll find something about cooking. Maybe when you discover the old cookbooks and stuff, pick out a family recipe and then have fun creating it yourself. Maybe it's a family activity with you, your spouse, and the children, creating some favorite dish out of a family recipe book. Make it fun. Find unique census notes. Some census takers added humorous or unique remarks in the margins, and check your ancestors' entries for odd comments or peculiarities. And I've seen a couple, but I haven't come across a lot of them. It could be something about, what was one of the ones I'd seen? Something to do with the address and had to go in the red door. Or the no number, but there was a red door that they went through stuff, but there could even be some little quirky thing about something the kid's done. You never know. Depends on what the census enumerator put on the records at the time. You could search passenger lists for unusual notes. Again, they would include things like baby born on board, traveling with goats or sheep, or had a mysterious illness while on board. There might be little notes like that. Were they bringing livestock with them? What sort of livestock were they bringing with them? Were they bringing? They might say that this person was the nanny for the family or something like that. So you'd have that there as well. Research local legends or folklore where your ancestors involved in a famous event or local legends. Investigate these stories and see if there's any truth behind the tale. I love researching, how did this myth start? How did this myth get started? Like, there's what's the name of that show? There's a show in England. I'm trying to remember what it's called. It's absolutely hilarious. And I see their little snippet, their little short videos on one particular question that they asked or one piece of information that they gave. And today's one, if you go to my Facebook page, there's a link there for it. And they're talking about the origins of the James Bond theme. It was hilarious. And I'm just sort of like, okay, being a big James Bond fan, I never knew that. So I'm actually, maybe in one of my James Bond books, I'm actually going to go back and have a look in there. And see if it's in there, because I don't recall the origin of the James Bond theme. And this one was just such a wild story. and one of the participants, he just turned around and says, "That's bullshit." I kid you not. Go watch the video. It's on my page. So yeah, you could find, what's the truth behind the tale? How did something get started? Where did this come from? Where did that come from? Is there a saying that is in your family? Where did that saying come from? The only time you've ever heard it is at family events. So where did that saying originate from? Is the story really true about this particular person? Did they really get arrested? And like the book, Australia's Most Dangerous Men, where I've got my second grand uncle is in there for treason and being a tyrant of a landlord and all of that. I thought, how much of this is actually true? So I started researching him and found police record. I found his arrest records for treason, all written out in pencil. It was scanned in. It was all written in pencil. and he got arrested. They kept him like overnight or something, then released him, and then he was re-arrested like 3 days later. So I found the police reports on that, and he was being arrested for treason against the crown. So so some of what was in there was true. And then I found the cards where they sent information to the American embassy in the US. They sent information to the American embassy in the US because he claimed to be American. There's also information in there about them contacting the Germany to find out if he was actually German. His father was originally from Sweden. Go figure. Anyway, there's a whole bunch of stuff. There's a whole bunch of stuff that I can find that will actually puts truth to a lot of truth to what's in this book. And speaking of that, look for family lawsuits or disputes. When you're looking for family lawsuits and disputes, you can even look at coroner's reports as well. Coroner's reports that can be very interesting, very enlightening. And especially if there's a coroner's inquest and you can get a copy of the inquest, those can be very good to look at too. But lawsuits for disputes, they can be very humorous and things like that. Even some of going back, were any of your ancestors involved in some way in the Salem witches trial? What happened? What were the outcomes and things like that? Investigate historical weather events. And think about, and especially in areas where your ancestors lived, did they live through hurricanes, blizzards, droughts? They may have moved from one location to the other because of the weather. So look for historical weather events. What damage was done to the area? Was your ancestors' house involved in it? Did they move after that event or did they stay? And newspapers will be a great thing to look at for that, because it would talk about destruction of property. It will talk about the destruction of property, and then you might even be able to find insurance claims if there was insurance around at the time. What else could you look at? The census reports will show if they stayed in the area. So you never know. Go have a look. Discover famous ancestor connections. You've heard me talk a couple of times about relativefinder.org, where you, if your tree is on Family Search, find your name, and there's actually when you log in, it will pick up your thing and then tell you who you're related to. And I put related to like this because some of those trees are not correct, especially on some of the well-known famous people trees. And then I'm looking at both sides of the tree, and you can find that, like a mother or a father were like 10 when the person that was their son or daughter was born. And so there's something wrong with those dates there. So you still have to go and verify the information that they have. Verify the information that they have to see, are you really related to that person? But it's real. I will tell you this, you can go down rabbit holes in this thing. You can go down a lot of rabbit holes in this thing. Check out odd jobs or unusual occupations. Did they have a job as being a rat catcher, a lamplighter, the town crier? And you'll find their professions or their trades listed on census reports, listed on marriage certificates, because they'll quite often list, what is the father's occupation, what is the groom's occupation. You may even find it on birth records or baptismal records. They may list what is the father's occupation in there. On the death certificate, it will have, what were their occupations listed on there as well. So there's documents you can go to see what sort of jobs that they had. Maybe they got written up for 10 years as a lamplighter, walking around every night to light the lamps, then walking around in the morning to extinguish them all. So you may find them in newspaper reports as well. Research superstitions and beliefs. Sometimes based on the region that people were in, or based on the religion that they had, their customs, their cultures, there could be some superstitions or beliefs around that. So learn about the superstitions, the remedies, the customs from your ancestors' time or region, and they can often make really cool stories. And some of them may even be written up in newspapers. They could be written up in books about the family, about the area, about the culture that was there at the time. In fact, look, read the history books as well, because they may talk about that particular area. And if there were certain superstitions, beliefs, customs, they may be listed, written in that book, because it was part of the history of that area. So check that out. Check exactly where your ancestors were living at the time. Census reports will help with that. And just see what, newspapers, that sort of thing. You can find interesting things. You could follow the trail of land records. Did your ancestors sell a tiny plot of land or inherit a wild amount of acreage? Land records can contain fun surprises about the property ownership. I'm trying to remember back. Was it last year? No, it was the year before. So it was in, what are we in, 24? So in 2022, we did a segment during my week-long genealogy course. There was a segment in there about land records and some of the fun stuff that you can find out about that. Did they inherit it? You could see if they inherited the land, if they purchased the land, what they purchased it for. And the other one that you could get through was through a grant. Was it given as one of the military grants? Or was it done through the land grabs? So there's different ways you could find, looking at the land records and things, finding how they came to own that piece of property. And there's interesting information that they put in there about the owners and things. And then when they sold it, where did they go next? You got to go looking in the land records to see if you could find out where they went to next, and where did they move, and why did they move, especially if they went from one side of the country to the other. Why would they do that? You can explore transportation records, whether they were on stagecoaches, trains, cars, any form of transportation, ships. You can look at the transportation records there, and if they've got passenger manifests, they may be listed on there as well. And then the last one we've got for you is documenting family pets. Pets often play a big role in families, so look for any mentions of animals in letters, photos, or records. It could be a beloved horse or dog that might be remembered in unexpected places. And when you're looking through all of this, also look through if there's family journals as well. You may find information about any of the things that we've just mentioned. Let's quickly go through the list again, just to refresh your memory. We've got explore historical newspapers for gossip and oddities, dive into probate inventories, search for nicknames and alias records, investigate clubs and organizations and fraternities, track down ancestral recipes, find unique census notes, search for passenger lists for unusual notes, research local legends and folklore, look for family lawsuits or disputes, excuse me, investigate historical weather events, discover famous ancestor connections, check for odd jobs or unusual occupations, research superstitions and beliefs, follow the trail of land records, explore transportation records, and finally, document family pets. That is what we have. That's what we have for you. So what is the most surprising or funny thing that you have discovered about one of your ancestors? So with that, we are out of here. Go out, have a super fantastic, sparkling evening, and we'll be back tomorrow evening